Hello, welcome to Ask Ashley. We are covering some really great things today. Today, we're going to talk about what to do if you are feeling disrespected or unappreciated, or even if they're not teens yet, your kids. I'm Ashley Jangro. I'm a life coach. I work with moms whose kids may be struggling with mental health or with behavior issues. I'm also the founder of Mentally Strong Moms, my signature program that helps moms build up the mental strength, learn the strategies, and get the support that they need to raise mentally strong kids. I'm very excited you're here today. I have many teenagers, and I've also worked with a lot of teenagers. And so I've put a lot of thought into this issue because this is something that I hear all the time from my one-on-one clients, in my group program, Mentally Strong Moms. I see it in parenting Facebook groups. I hear it from my friends and from, parents of my kids' friends, is that moms, and sometimes dads too, are just exhausted from feeling disrespected and unappreciated all the time. That it's exhausting, that I see a lot in Facebook groups that moms are saying, I just feel like I don't even want to do this anymore. I'm so tired of being treated poorly by my teen. And so I put a lot of thought into what it is that we can do about that. And so I've come up with 4 actionable strategies that will help improve your relationship with your teenager. If you're feeling like that, if you're feeling exhausted from feeling disrespected and unappreciated. If you have any questions at any time during the live stream, you can put them in the comments on Facebook or on YouTube. And I will see those. Also, at the end of this call, I'm going to go ahead and open up the call to just ask if anybody wants coaching or if anybody has any questions that they want to ask live. So you can use, if you do want to do that when I open it up, you can use the link that's in the description on YouTube for this video or on Facebook. And what will happen is you'll click that link. You'll have the opportunity to go into this little waiting room where you can check your video and check your sound, and then you can be brought on to the call. So feel free to enter anything into the comments if you have any questions. I'm going to go ahead and dive right into these 4 actionable items that will help improve your relationship with your team. But first, just want you to take a second and think about your goal when it comes to your teen. I want you to think about what brought you here today. Why did you click on this video and decide to listen? Maybe your goal is just that your teen changes their behavior. And if that's why you're here, that's fine. We're going to get to that. Maybe it's just that you stop feeling horrible all the time. Maybe this is how teenagers act, but I don't want to take it personally all the time. I don't want it to make me feel terrible all the time. And you're in the perfect place if that's the case. Maybe it's that you and your teen can improve your relationship, that you can just have a good relationship. Maybe when they were younger, you guys were very, very close. And then as they've become a teenager, you miss that. So just take a second and think about, if things were perfect with my teenager, what would have to change? Would it have to be their behavior? Would it have to be how I felt about things? Would it have to be that we could get along again? So there have been times for me when I've really wanted my teenagers to change their behavior, but I also know that they're never going to be perfect. I know I can't expect that. I'm clearly not perfect. So I know that would be too much to expect. So then I start thinking, okay, I know they're not going to be perfect, but I don't want it to hurt so bad all the time when there's something going on. One of my, when I'm teaching in Mentally Strong Moms or when I'm working with a one-on-one coaching client, one of the things that I like to focus on is that I really prioritize connection over correction when it comes to my teens, when it comes to my kids. And so know that as we're going through all of these actionable items, it's one of my goals is always to maintain that connection with my teenager without sacrificing my own mental wellness to make that happen. So as you think of your goal, just hang on to it in your mind as we go through these first items. The first 2 items that we're going to cover, you can do without any involvement with your teen. It just has to do with you. They're designed to help you feel better no matter what's going on with your child, no matter if they never change their behavior. The first 2 are designed to help you not feel terrible all the time. And then the second 2 address how to elicit that change in behavior from your teens. So if that's what you're here to hear, then stick with me and we'll get to that. So, the very first actionable item that you can do to improve your relationship with your teen has to do with noticing how you're thinking about their behavior. One of the things that I teach all the time in Mentally Strong Moms is that our thoughts, first of all, two things, they create our feelings. So, whatever we're thinking, they generate a certain vibration in our body. And that we call, we have different ones that we call feelings. Some are comfortable, some are uncomfortable, but they all start with how we're thinking about something. And then the second thing about thoughts is that they're optional, that they can be changed, that they feel like fact because that's how our brain presents them to us. But when we take a step back and begin to become aware of what we're thinking and challenge that thinking, then those thoughts are optional. So keep that in mind as I go through this about the thoughts. So our thoughts are not fact. I think this was like mind blowing to me when I first realized it, that our thoughts are not fact and that they create our emotions. They're just one of an infinite number of possible ways, possible perceptions or possible ways we can interpret a situation. So they're optional, but what happens is they do create a filter. So I think of this kind of like when I say filter, I think of it kind of like if you were to put on a pair of glasses that were blue tinted, and you would begin to see everything as kind of bluish, or if they were pink tinted, you'd begin to see everything as kind of pink. And I have some sunglasses like that. They make these sunsets look so incredible. But when I take them off, I'm like, whoa, I didn't expect things to be this color because it was all pink. So we create that filter. So whatever thought we are like clinging onto, even though it feels like fact, it may not feel like a thought, our brains begin to look for evidence to prove that thought true. So let me give you an example. If you have this thought, my teenager is disrespectful, then so many of their behaviors, even if they could be described, explained a different way, for example, forgetfulness or carelessness or any of these other things, your brain is going to begin to interpret that behavior as disrespect. I did a video a long time ago about this where I had asked my daughters to fold their laundry so that I could have my laundry baskets back so I could live out of my laundry baskets. But I had asked them to fold their laundry by a certain day in the week. I think it was Wednesday. And I went in there Thursday morning and their laundry was still not folded. It was still sitting in the baskets. I still didn't have my baskets back. And my brain immediately offered me, they have no respect for me. Like they know this bothers me. They know that it's going to take up my time. They have no respect for me. And it took a moment for me to step back and say, hold on. And I call this I took a moment to investigate my thinking. I'm like, "Is that even true?" Well, yeah, I could perceive it as disrespect if I wanted to, but and then I asked myself, "Is there any other possible explanation for this?" And I started thinking about it and I thought, "Yeah, they are really busy. They have a lot on their plates. There's a lot going on in their lives with all of their activities. Maybe they just forgot. Maybe, yeah, they told me they would get it done, but they forgot." And immediately my brain offers up all this resistance. Well, I reminded them this number of times and they remember all these other things when it's important to them. And then I thought, hold on, do I ever forget some things? Absolutely. Even if I've told somebody else I'll do it, it slips my mind all the time. Um, Another possible option is that they're overwhelmed, that they knew they were staring at it. They didn't forget. They were staring at it while they were doing their homework and they just felt like it was too much and they got overwhelmed and their brains flooded with emotion and they just weren't able to get to everything. So, those are some of the other possible interpretations of why that laundry wasn't done. But without stepping back and bringing to my awareness that I was perceiving it as disrespect, then it just would have felt true to me. And what would have happened then is that I would have put on those pink glasses, but the pink would be disrespect. And that means that when they got home that day, if they forgot to say hi as they walked in the door, or if they forgot to say I love you right before they went to bed, I would see all of that through that filter of disrespect. And I would begin finding evidence. My brain, and this is all happening below my awareness. I'm not like proactively doing this. This is happening in a way that I'm not even noticing it. But my brain begins collecting all this evidence like, yep, there it is again. That's disrespect. There it is again. That's disrespect. And I want to mention here, when I first started thinking about this, my brain offered up all kinds of resistance. I started having the thought like, oh, what? Am I supposed to just let them get away with anything? So if you're feeling like that, That's okay. That's totally normal. Hang on to that and we'll circle back to that because we are going to get around to how to address that thought. But when what I want you to think about is start to notice, what filter am I seeing all of their behavior through? And the reason to do this is because as you begin to notice, oh, hey, that specific incident could be explained in a different way, but I'm feeling it as disrespect, then it's going to make you feel terrible. It's going to make you feel disrespected. It's going to, your brain is going to find all this evidence for all the ways they're disrespecting you. Even if you stopped and thought about it, that specific incident might not have anything to do with disrespect. So, this is one of the ways that I use to make myself feel better when I start to notice, okay, I'm perceiving everything as disrespect, or I'm perceiving their behavior as a lack of appreciation. So, for example, if I say to my teenager, hey, can you make sure to clean out the cat's litter box before you leave for school today? And she doesn't, I step back and notice, hey, am I perceiving that as disrespect? Am I perceiving that as unappreciation? And do I want to? Maybe I want to. Maybe I want to say, yep, that is disrespectful. And then when we get to number 3 and 4, we can address that. But maybe because I don't want to feel terrible and disrespected all the time, I can stop and say, okay, in this one instance, it was just forgetfulness. And then the next thing that happens, my brain won't immediately perceive it through that filter of disrespect. And I'll be able to see each individual instance as its own unique circumstance that is not all under this filter of disrespect. And I think that this was very powerful for me because I'm not sure if it's my personality type or just my nature or if it's how humans work in general. But I used to do this. I would get this idea in my head, like they don't appreciate me, and then my brain would begin to collect evidence for it, and it felt terrible. I felt unappreciated. And I wouldn't even be aware that this was going on, but I would start to feel heavy and start to feel tired. And I would think, why? Why is everyone around me? Why are all my kids treating me this way? And whenever I get into that thinking where I am feeling like I'm a victim of what's going on around me, I stop and think, is this a perception issue? Am I using a filter and perceiving all of their behavior through that filter? It's a very powerful technique to question my own thinking. And as I do that, I begin to feel better. I realize, oh, okay, my brain was making this mean that they don't appreciate me or that they don't respect me. And that's not even actually the case. So again, I just stop and I investigate my thoughts. I ask myself, what am I making it mean? What am I making it mean that they didn't clean the litter box or that the laundry wasn't folded? What is my brain making that mean? And then I can ask myself, do I like what it's making it mean? Do I like how that makes me feel? And then I can decide to perceive it differently based on that. And again, if you're starting to feel like, okay, that's just letting our teenagers off the hook, bear with me, because I like to think of it as I'm letting myself off the hook. It's still happening, but I don't feel so terrible about it. And that's kind of what I want. That is a perfect segue into the second one, which the second actionable strategy. So that first one is to notice your filter and begin to investigate your thinking. Ask yourself questions. What am I making it mean? And the second one is to stop arguing with reality. Byron Katie, who is another incredible life coach that has a book called Loving What Is, which I am convinced is the secret to happiness, when you are able to just look at what is in your life and enjoy and appreciate it and not want it to be different, has a quote. She says, when you argue with reality, you lose, but only every time. So the way I like to think about this is when I'm looking at my teen's behavior, it's reality. It has already happened. If I allow my brain to go to this place where it shouldn't have happened, it's arguing with what is. It's saying, here's reality, and that shouldn't be the case. And the way I think about this is it's no different than if I'm arguing with the weather. And I was thinking about a good analogy for this. And I think, my birthday, I live in Colorado and my birthday's in April. The weather is never nice on my birthday, but I always think it should be. I'm like, it's spring. It's my birthday. It should be beautiful. There should not be snow on the ground and dirty, melty, icky snow, not like the beautiful, fluffy snow, but it should be beautiful outside. And it's so pointless because obviously I can't control the weather. And what happens is there's a couple effects when I begin thinking it should be nice on my birthday. It has two effects. Actually, I think there's more. Number one, I miss out on what is on my birthday. I miss out on the beautiful trees that are starting to bloom. I miss out on the time, the incredible time with my family, or the cards I'm getting in the mail, or the phone calls I'm getting, because I'm focused on arguing with reality, focused on what should be different instead of what's right there in front of me, what is. And what is the other effect? I'm looking at my notes here and I say this will have two effects. But I think the other effect is just that I will feel miserable because I will be focused on what has gone wrong instead of what's right there in front of me. So I want to bring this back to when we focus on what is with our teens, or when we focus on what should be, it's very different. So when we're thinking about my teen should be respectful, in that sense, first of all, if we check our filter and we realize, yeah, this actually is disrespect, then if we start thinking they should be respectful, then we're doing that. We're arguing with reality. And it just feels terrible. It creates cognitive dissonance in our brains, which does not feel good in our bodies. So we have what is, and then we have what we believe should be. And because they don't match up, it feels uncomfortable to us. So a different way to think about this is, okay, my teen is being disrespectful. Now what? And that puts us back in the position of power. It takes us away from this spot where we're trying to change reality and it feels uncomfortable and it feels powerless and it feels hopeless, to this is reality. My teen is being disrespectful. Now what? And again, when we start accepting, the reality is sometimes teenagers are not going to be respectful. And again, I want to go back to, this is after we've checked that filter and we do confirm to our brains, yep, this behavior is disrespectful. If it's something else, then we have already dealt with that by changing that filter. But then when we realize, okay, sometimes teenagers are disrespectful, that is just the reality of our lives. Sometimes we're disrespectful to other people too. This does not in any sense mean that we are going to not address that behavior, but it takes us out of that feeling of discomfort because it's not as it should be. When I want to go back for a second about when we miss out, like when I'm wishing that the weather was different on my birthday, I'm missing out on the good parts of that. When we're thinking something like my teenager is disrespectful, as opposed to in this specific circumstance is being disrespectful, we miss out, and we're thinking they should be respectful. We miss out on what they are. They might be funny and sometimes disrespectful. They might be really creative. They might be a good friend to their friends. They might be extremely intelligent, and that means sometimes they argue, which feels like disrespect. When we accept this is who they are and this is how they should be because this is who they are, then we open ourselves up to a couple things. First of all, appreciating all the other aspects that make them them. And that's part of not maintaining that focus on what should be different, but just loving what is. We get to see what it is that we love about them. We can set aside for a moment the disrespect, the circumstances where they're being disrespectful, and recognize the positive parts about them. But also, it gives us the opportunity to ask, now what? So then we can ask ourselves, now what do we do about it? In this circumstance, my teen was being disrespectful. Now what? And one of the things that this enables us to do is really focus our creative energy elsewhere. I ask myself all the time when I'm really feeling, when I'm bogged down in that self pity, like people are being unappreciative and disrespectful to me, I ask myself, is this where I want to be spending my brain energy? And it's usually no, because it feels terrible and I'm not figuring out a solution to it. So I often ask myself, here we are. My teen is being disrespectful. Now what? And that allows me to focus my creative energy on a solution instead of wishing that things were different. And then the other impact it'll have is that you'll have just a different compassion and understanding because when you realize sometimes humans are disrespectful, this is sometimes it's because other humans perceive it as disrespectful, but sometimes that was their intention. Sometimes that's the intention of teenagers. And we can look at all the reasons why. We can think about how they are working on building up their own identity. We can think about how, based on their brain development, their peers are more important than the authority figures at the moment. We can think about all the reasons why, and it can allow us some understanding and compassion for a teenager as opposed to wishing that they were different. So I do like to think about that a lot. Whenever my brain, excuse me, is whenever I notice the word should in my brain, I consider that a red flag. I step back and ask myself, I tell myself, I'm arguing with reality. Here's what is happening, as opposed to here's what should be happening. And I do that with myself too. Whenever I start thinking, I should be doing this thing instead of, I should be doing the laundry instead of taking a break, then I stop and I ask myself, who says why? I really use that word should as a red flag because all I'm doing is arguing with reality and I will lose, but only every time. And what I mean by lose is I will make myself feel terrible. I will make myself feel miserable. So some of this can begin to sound like, okay, so we're just supposed to let our teens get away with whatever they want. And I want to emphasize that that is not the case. This is just a way to clean up our own thinking, to investigate our own thinking so that we're sure that we are not just thinking a certain way because of the filter we're using, and that we are noticing this is the case. Now what? And putting our creative energy towards solutions as opposed to indulging in or sitting in or wallowing in things should be different. So that brings us to number 3, which is one of the actionable strategies that you can take with your team. But I want to emphasize how important it is that we begin to investigate our own thinking first. And we begin to notice our filter first. Because if we go to our teenagers and we say, you are so disrespectful because of this and because of this and because of this and because of this, and we present all the evidence that our brain has gathered due to that filter, it's not going to make any sense to our teenagers. It's going to create defensiveness in our teenagers because they're going to say, they're going to be thinking, I'm just really forgetful and I'm overwhelmed and I'm not perfect. I can't get to all those things. And so it's going to create conflict. One of the things that I talk about a lot in the program is what happens when we feel attacked. We begin to act out of the emotional, we go into fight or flight or freeze, which you've probably heard before, and we begin to react out of our emotional brains. We don't have the same access to our prefrontal cortex anymore, which is the rational parts of our brains. I compare it a lot to a barking dog and a wise owl. When we are feeling attacked and we get defensive, the dog starts barking because it's protecting us. That's the emotional piece of our brain. And the wisdom, the wise owl, is no longer accessible. It flies away. And so when we come at our child, in an attack mode saying, here are all the things you're doing wrong, without first cleaning up our own thinking about it, then that's what happens. they already don't have the same access that we do to their prefrontal cortex, the rational piece of their brains. Until they're 25, the cortex is not fully formed. So we want access to all of it that we can if we're going to go into a discussion with them. So we really want to ensure that we're cleaning up our thinking first. And the way we do that is, and the way we do that is what I've talked about, is to ask ourselves those questions. What filter am I operating from? Um, is this even true? What am I making it mean? All of these powerful questions. Then we can move into the actionable item number 3, which is to have a conversation with our kids, not an attack, not a here are all the things you're doing wrong. Again, I want you to remember that um, you have the option to prioritize a connection over correction. If you think about your goal, if it is to feel better sometimes and it is to have that relationship with your teen, then you can use this discussion to understand where they're coming from as opposed to just trying to correct their behavior. So again, I want you to go back to that goal that you thought of at the beginning of this call and ask yourself, is it just that I want their behavior to be perfect at all times? And if you're actually thinking about this, you know that that's not a rational expectation of another human being. You know they're going to mess up sometimes. So this is an opportunity to understand from their perspective what they're able to do, why, to understand some different reasons why they might not be doing those things so that you can begin to shift that filter in your brain. And just to connect with them, just to develop an understanding. So you can approach your teen and say, hey, I've noticed these things aren't getting done, or I've noticed that at this certain time you speak to me in a way that seems harsh, or whatever it is that your teenager's doing, you can just tell them, like, I've noticed this is going on. It's been interesting because sometimes my brain tells me the story that you're just disrespectful, and I'm working on that. I want to understand from your perspective what's happening so that I'm not always seeing your behavior through that filter. And their answer is going to reveal a lot. Oftentimes you're probably going to hear, I don't know. And it's just a great starting point for a conversation where you can start to say, give ideas. Maybe it's that you're tired. Maybe it's that you're hungry. Maybe like, what is it that's going on? Maybe you're stressed about school, and it can open up that conversation. And here's what I want to emphasize right here. Even if their answer is not what you expected, even if they come across as attacking you, well, you never respect me, so I shouldn't have to respect you. Whatever it is, take a step back, listen to what's happening in your brain, take a moment to calm any emotions that are coming up, breathe into them, and then just try to understand what their story might be. Try to understand they're only seeing a limited amount of information, and try to understand what it might feel like to be in their shoes with that limited information. It might be tempting to say, I do all these things for you, and pause right there, because understand they don't see all of that. Our brains they have millions, billions of stimuli coming in at any given moment. And so they have to prioritize certain things. And so try to understand what your child's brain is seeing. Understand the story that their brain is offering them. And as you begin to understand their story, again, it just gives you information, it gives you data points to say, oh, okay, this is how they're seeing the world. And you may reach the point where you think their behavior makes sense. If they're seeing the world in that way, their behavior actually makes sense. And I could give 1,000 examples of what this is, of how this might help you have more compassion for your child. But I want to go back to the laundry one. If I approach my child and they say, my story is, I have so many things on my plate, I'm so overwhelmed, I cannot get around to all of them, then I will have that understanding and compassion for them. And then we can approach number 4. We can approach setting expectations and consequences. And again, I want to emphasize it's so important that we clean up our own thinking, that we understand our own story, that we understand our own perspective and filters before we go into expectations and consequences. Because it's so easy to say, I expect them to be respectful. But when we actually step back and think about that, someone's version of respectful is so different than someone else's definition of respectful. It might have to do with tone of voice. It might have to do with keeping things done. It might have to do with saying please and thank you. It might have to do with, giving gifts on holidays or birthdays. There's so many different things. And we believe in our own minds that everyone shares those same expectations, but they don't. So what we have to do is begin to set these are the clear expectations I have, and here are the consequences if those things don't happen. And the expectations might have to do with saying please and thank you. The expectations might be, on my birthday, I expect that you are doing something that shows me that you appreciate me. And then you can kind of talk about what that might look like to someone that's different than it might look for someone else. But what happens there is you are saying, here are my very clear expectations. My expectations are every week by Wednesday, your laundry is folded and put away. If your expectations are that the main areas of the house are cleaned up, if your expectations are before you go to bed, please say I love you, whatever it is, then you can say, these are my expectations and these are the consequences if they don't happen. And I want to go back to cleaning up our own thinking around that, because it can feel like, no, people should just do that without being asked. These are the things that people should just do if they appreciate someone. And I want you to go back to asking yourself, am I arguing with reality? Because reality is sometimes people don't. Sometimes they forget. Sometimes they're in a bad mood. Sometimes they haven't gotten enough sleep. Sometimes they're distracted. Sometimes they're angry and they want to make a point. But if we're allowing our brain to make that mean they don't appreciate us or they're disrespecting us, it's going to make ourselves feel terrible. So then you can ask yourself, what is reality? Reality is they don't know what I'm expecting and how that's going to make me feel. So if I'm able to say to them, here are my expectations, here are the consequences if those things don't happen, then there is the opportunity for them to understand and change their behavior. Now, I want to emphasize something with expectations and consequences. I was on a call yesterday where I was talking to a client that was sharing with me some of the people she works with, and she was talking about, these very clear expectations were set for their son, and there were very clear consequences if he did not follow those expectations, and it had to do with his grades and turning in homework. And she said, over and over, I observe parents setting these expectations, but then the consequences don't follow. They don't follow through with the consequences. And it has to do with how terrible it feels to follow through with consequences. There's always reasons not to. So if I tell my daughters, my expectation is that your laundry's folded by Wednesday and I have my baskets back. But then my brain is like, well, but they had this activity on Tuesday night and they actually had a lot of homework. And in fact, it was finals week. So I shouldn't expect that week. And so then they don't have the consequence that I set up for them. It is so much more damaging than not having expectations and consequences at all, because it confirms to their brains underneath their awareness, oh, this consequence will not actually happen. So once you set these clear expectations with a clear consequence, if that expectation doesn't happen, it is imperative that you follow through with the consequence, even if it seems like there's other things that impact it. And this is why it's so critical that you stop and think about, what are my expectations for my child? Do I expect that they always have this done and there's no exceptions to it? Or am I willing, when I see that the laundry is still not folded on Thursday, am I willing to talk with them and understand, okay, what were the extenuating circumstances this week that made that impossible for you? But I have to think about, am I willing to hold to a consequence no matter what is going on? And it really helps you investigate, what are my exact expectations? Because you realize I'm going to have the terrible feelings of following through with the consequence. It doesn't feel good to follow through with the consequence with your child. It doesn't feel good to say to them, okay, because of this, you cannot use your phone tonight, or you cannot go to your friend's house, even though it's their 16th birthday and it's never going to happen again. It doesn't feel good. So it allows you to really clarify, when am I willing to follow through with these consequences, and what are my actual expectations? The majority of the time when I step back and think about that, I start realizing my expectations are somewhat unreasonable. Sometimes things happen in my life that mean I don't get the things done that I wanted to get done. And so it again gives me more compassion for my child. But when I realize, okay, if they never do this thing, I'm going to feel miserable. I'm going to feel disrespected. Then it's up to me then to say, here are my expectations, and there will be a consequence if it doesn't happen. So, again, before you get there, those first two are necessary. Clean up your thinking, identify what your filter is, stop arguing with reality, understand things should, yes, they would make the world easier, but the reality is the things that we think should happen do not always happen. And remember that there must be that follow through. So those are the 4 actionable items. Become aware of your filter. Stop arguing with reality. Have a conversation. Ask your child what's going on. Have a conversation with them. And 4, set clear expectations and clear consequences that you are willing to follow through on. So I want to see if we have any questions. As I'm going through all this, I want to point out this is exactly what we do in the Mentally Strong Mom Method. We spend a lot of time identifying what are the thoughts, what are the filters that we're operating out of as mom, and how do they make us feel? We learn to process those feelings so they don't feel as terrible. So we're teaching our brains that we can handle those emotions so that we have that mental calm. We have that stability that allows us to approach situations with our child without operating out of our own terrible feelings. We address those separately. So that's where in Mentally Strong Moms, we build up our own mental strength so that we have that calm and the confidence to address anything going on with our child. So we spend a lot of time doing this and then identifying what is our reality, what is the result of arguing with it versus accepting it and learning to fall in love with it, which then allows us to approach our kids with confidence, with calm, with a clean mind so that we can address what's going on with them. And then how to set those clear expectations. And we spend some time identifying, what are my expectations for my child? What do I want for them? We look at what are our goals for our kids, and then how do we accomplish that? So that is within the Mentally Strong Mom Method. If that is something you believe you might be interested in, the first step is to book a strategy call with me. It's an incredibly powerful call where we uncover the situation, your unique situation, and you do, whether or not you end up joining the Mentally Strong Mom Method, you walk away with strategies that apply to your unique situation that you can use with your child. So the way to do that is just to go to talkwithashley.com. You'll reach my calendar. You'll see when I have openings, and you can book one of those strategy calls. There's absolutely no obligation. I love talking to moms and understanding what our different problems are. So if you have any inclination, go ahead and book that call and know that there's no obligation. So go to talkwithashley.com. Otherwise, we can I can open this up for questions if anybody wants to jump on for live coaching. We had some phenomenal live coaching sessions during the last call where people brought up here, yes, I agree with what you're saying, or yes, I understand what you're saying, but it doesn't seem to apply to my unique situation. So if you're in that circumstance, then you can jump on that link that is in the comments on the YouTube video or on the Facebook video. And it will bring you into a waiting room. If we don't have any of those, oh, thank you, Evan. I appreciate you being here. But if we don't have anyone who wants to jump on, or we don't have any questions, then again, I invite you to book the strategy call by going to talkwithashley.com. Also, you can come jump in the Mom Squad. That's my free online community where we have discussions about this, where we provide support for each other, where we talk about what's going on with our own kids and as moms, we work together to raise mentally strong kids. You can reach that by going to ashley.tube/mom squad. And you can jump in that community and be part of those discussions. So I hope to see you in the community. I cannot wait to talk to you on a strategy call. And otherwise, I will be back here next week, same time, same place, 10 a.m. Mountain Times. Every Wednesday, I'm here for Ask Ashley Live, where I open it up. People can get coached, people can ask questions, or if I don't have any guests, then I teach something that I've been working on in my own life with my own kids or with my clients, which is like today. So thank you so much for joining today. I look forward to seeing you next week.